Hey everyone and welcome to another video guys, and today I'm going to be sharing with you my Sylas guide. The long-awaited Sylas guide, everyone. This has been a much requested video. A lot of people have been bugging me saying, Curtis, can you please do a video on Sylas? He's broken, he's OP, he's this and that. Yes, I got to admit, he hasn't been nerfed. I thought he would be nerfed and kind of removed from the meta a little bit. But obviously, right, love having him around. He's been probably the most popular champion in the last 3 patches. So I finally mustered up all of my energy, all of my willpower to do this guide. So there's a lot to cover, a lot of detail in here. So sit back, relax, maybe grab a notepad, and let's dive straight in. Now, before we get into the guide, I wanted to share with you a cool little app that I myself have been using to record and share my gameplay called MetalTV. Now, a lot of you watching this video are going to be like, what the hell? Curtis is doing a sponsorship? He's doing like an ad? What? I've never seen him do that. You're right. This has been the first little ad I've ever done on any of my videos. And the reason being is because I wanted to wait for something that I myself would genuinely use, something that I believed in. And this is the first app where I'm thinking to myself, wait, what? I need this in my life right now. Now, for those of you who've actually been around the scene for a while, the most popular recording platform to actually record your gameplay was actually plays.tv. And ever since that dissolved, I've always been looking for something that was been really easy to record, doesn't actually take up much CPU, makes it really easy to share clips, just makes my whole reviewing process much easier. Now, I myself have been using metal.tv recently to record my own games. I'll be honest, I didn't even know it existed. And when I came across it, I got introduced to it. I'm like, wow. This is really awesome. So basically, it's a pretty stock standard recording platform. You can record all your games 1080p, 60 FPS. Now, there's a few really cool things about this though. You can actually create clips very easily from your VODs, and you can actually share them with your friends. Now, for me, I use it a little bit differently. I like to record moments where I messed up and share this with people in my Midland Academy. And this is how I plan to use it, and actually record little moments where I'm like, okay, this is where I misplayed, and this is how I came to this mistake. So this is an example of me just getting dove by a Malphite at level 6 here, or level 8, sorry. And I like to relive these painful experiences. That's just the way I use it. Not a lot of people are normal like me. They would probably want to record their montage plays, their solo kills, their outplays, their pentakills. And you can easily share this on either Discord here, Twitter, Reddit, Tumblr, whatever you want to do. I don't know who the hell uses Tumblr nowadays. But it makes it really easy to share these clips via any of these social media platforms. You can edit it, do whatever you want to do. This is really, really awesome. This is how I record my games, how I'm going to record my games heading into the future. You can actually connect it with your mobile and look at your clips and your VODs from your mobile, which is actually pretty cool. So instead of doing whatever you do on the toilet, I'm going to leave it awkward silence here. You can actually review your VODs or do whatever you want to do wherever you are, which is pretty cool as well. So I'm going to drop a download link in the description below if you're interested in taking a look. It's free, easy to download, give it a crack, and let me know how it goes, guys. So these are the areas we're going to be covering today. Feel free to jump around if you really want to. Otherwise, if you can watch this video chronologically, you will get the best viewer experience because there's a reason I chose this particular order. But diving straight in, guys, as you've probably found out the hard way, Sylas is in a very good spot, and I contribute this to a few specific things. Number one, Everfrost suiting his trading patterns, being an exceptional item, and this the build path itself complements every part of his kit. The ability haste, the hard CC, the extra durability, etc. Dark Seal being so gold efficient for obvious reasons, and just working so well on a lot of these AP champions. The meta rewarding champions that have inbuilt mobility and skirmishing strength. I've said this 1,000 times within my channel. Champions that have skirmish prowess or very good at skirmishing, just a great in solo queue, and Sylas is one of the best skirmishers in the entire game. And the small gradual buffs to the W, which is the Kingslayer on patch 11.3 and 11.6. And finally here, something that not many people talk about, Sylas has insane stat growth. If you actually go to you can actually go to the wiki and see Sylas' stat growth comparatively to a lot of other champions in the game. He scales insanely well with levels. He doesn't even really need gold. He doesn't really need specific items. He just scales well with levels. That's why when you play Sylas, at every single point you put into your W, it feels amazing. And this has kind of gone under the radar, and not many people talk about this. Now, a common question I get is, Curtis, you know, Sylas is getting really strong. I'm a bit worried. Why would you want us to pick him up? You know, why would you want to make a guide on a champion that's just going to get nerfed? Well, first of all, it hasn't, and it's been strong for a very long time, which says to me that Riot don't really want to nerf Sylas. They like where he is, and they just want to buff other champions. But even if that was the case, it doesn't matter because Sylas is always an amazing champion to have in your pool. Yes, he's not a great main to have, right? You don't need to one-trick him or main him, but he's a great secondary or third champion to have in your pool as a niche pick to counter certain champions or certain compositions. So regardless of where he goes, even if he gets a little bit weaker and he's not as strong as he is, he's a great champion to have in your pool. And again, as always, everything in this guide is just my opinion, my experiences. Again, you might have a different opinion, and that is okay. I'm not saying I'm completely 110% right in everything I say. I'm open for suggestions and other interpretations of the champion. Now, just a word of warning. Sylas is not a stock standard champion, guys. Okay, so if you're thinking of picking up this champion, you must understand these things. 1, Sylas should not be a main. You can't be a Sylas main because he's way too situational, and especially after the meta shifts and Sylas isn't or doesn't become as strong as he is now, you can't, right? Because he's very reliant on the ultimates that are within the game. He's more of a niche pick, okay? And your ability to play Sylas doesn't just scale with micro and matchup understanding like a lot of other champions do. It scales with overall game understanding. And this is why a lot of pro players, they can just pick Sylas even after like 20 games played on the champion and absolutely pop off, even more so than a lot of one-tricks, because he scales with game sense and game understanding. This is also one of the main reasons why people as well, like at the lower elos like silver and gold, will really struggle as when actually Sylas gets nerfed, because he does really require a lot of understanding about the game holistically and what all the other champions do. And Sylas, like any other champion, does have particular wave states, trading patterns, lane paces that he thrives and feels comfortable within. But due to the inherent outplay potential within his kit, the entire script can be thrown out the window. He's not like Twisted Fate where, okay, you got to demat this one, you got to base on this amount of gold, and you do this perfect step-by-step thing and you get this output. No. I mean, yes, to a certain degree, and we'll get into this, but that entire narrative, that entire script can just be gone in a heartbeat because there is so much outplay potential and you can just make these insane proactive plays when someone just missteps once. And this ties to the last little point here, guys, is that Chaos is Sylas's middle name. If you are not comfortable with Chaos, skirmishing, heavy trading, opportunistic plays, 2v2s, adaptation, then he is not for you. He's not the champion for you whatsoever, okay? Now, for Sylas's, this is more of like a quick overarching view of Sylas's identity. I've like to describe Sylas through the lens of Ditto the Pokemon. So for those of you, I'm sure a lot of you watching this have just dabbled in Pokemon at least a little bit. You would have come across this Pokemon Ditto OG. I remember back in the day as a kid, I used to love it. So essentially, Sylas's identity and role within a game changes based off who is around him, all right? At times, he can be that heavy diver, complement like the Kha'Zix or the Camille, or even flank the enemy. Again, depending on the champs in the game and what access to ultimates that he has, but other times he can simply just peel, right? He can peel your AD carry, he has pretty solid peel with his E, he can create a lot of space with depending on the ultimates in the game, and he can use his Everfrost defensively. So my biggest advice when it comes to understanding Sylas's identity is to keep an open mind. Focus on identifying ways to increase the likelihood of 2v2s and chaos around the map, and as long as you are actively identifying the ultimates you want to consume, then over time you will develop this Ditto-like mentality just naturally, okay? Now again, this is just a very broad, I didn't really want to put this slide in, but I think it does give you at least like a glimmer of some, like, allows you to hold on to something in regards to trying to internalize Sylas's identity. But don't worry, throughout this guide, I'm sure you guys will have a lot deeper understanding of this champion's identity. So now for Sylas's rune pages. Now, I'm not going to be covering Electrocute Sylas in this guide. I know there are probably some niche scenarios where you can go Electro Sylas, but I don't think it's relevant even if you want to be a Sylas main. It's not even worth directing your attention towards it because as of right now, Conqueror is the way to go. No matter the matchup, no matter the game pace, nothing else matters apart from Conqueror. So yes, I might get a little bit of hate from that from the Sylas one tricks. I couldn't care less. It's not important. Now we're going to be covering the Conqueror page first. Conqueror synergizes very well with Sylas's extended trade identity and extended teamfight identity. Synergizes very well with his W because he's going to be in the fight for a very long time. We round that off with Presence of Mind for obvious reasons. Doesn't really get value from either of those. Legend Tenacity. Again, Tenacity is great for Sylas due to his committal way of playing skirmishes, fights, and trades. Round that off with Last Stand. Again, synergizes very well with these trading patterns because you're going to get very low to make use of or get max value from the W. Again, just the best in this row here. In the secondary page here, we have Inspiration for Biscuits and Cosmic Insight. Cosmic Insight is very good on Sylas for two reasons. You're buying Everfrost every single game, so the item haste comes in handy, and you're getting Zonyas pretty much every game as well, so that also works for both of those items. And the Summoner Spell Haste is also very valuable because of how impactful you are with both your TP and your Flash. Now, you can obviously switch out the Armor and MR whenever you need be. Biscuits allows you to minimize your early lane very effectively, and if you don't end up needing it, you can always sell them anyway. Yes, some Sylas players really do like Fleet. I'm not a fan whatsoever. I don't think there's a single scenario in which you should be going Fleet, because what I've realized is that without Conqueror, your champion doesn't really have an identity. Like, sure, you can do the classic Steal Alt and then shift your identity in accordance to the ultimates you have in the game, but I just found it really difficult to be impactful in those mid-game fights because the identity of Sylas is to be a skirmisher. Like, I would rather go down in farm in the early game as long as I'm getting XP and just at least have a clear identity heading into mid-game. So, look, I don't think Fleet is necessary. If you have, or you're against a poke-oriented champion, you don't have any jungle control, and you're just going to get screwed in the early lane, just go 3 points Q, or even max Q, if you really, really need to. At least then you're going to scale into mid-game quite nicely. I found that if you go Fleet, you're just going to be useless through the entire game. So just don't even worry about Fleet whatsoever. Now for summoners, and a lot of people don't understand this. Again, we always see, we usually 95% of the time see the Flash TP for obvious reasons. You can, if you can ideally conserve it for side lane plays, it can be quite effective due to, again, Sylas's inherent skirmishing strength, just like you would with champions like Akali or Galio. But if you're getting dominated in the early lane and you want to make sure that you don't miss any XP, given how powerful Sylas scales with levels, then that is completely fine as well. But the second option is actually go Ignite. Now, when you're in a lot of these heavy trading melee matchups, Yone, Fizz, Diana, Talon, etc., Ignite is amazing because a lot of these champions actually aren't going to go TP, so you don't really need TP anyway, and the Ignite can be the difference between having genuine kill threat and actually having to lose. So I found a lot of success with going Ignite specifically into Yone. I think it's amazing into Katarina. I think it's amazing into champions like Diana, even Yasuo. So give this a try. It may not work for all of you. It definitely comes at a trade-off because your mid game is a lot weaker. You can't really side lane as effectively, and you can't really do these creative side lane TPs. But your 2v2 strength, your ability to snowball in the early game, it rises significantly. Now for Sylas's itemization, look, Sylas's build path is very straightforward. There's only like 1 or 2 specific build paths you can go on Sylas, and that's only when it comes to your second item. Other than that, it's very, very straightforward. We always want to be going Dark Seal Refillable, gives you that flexibility in the early lane, and because you can greed, you don't really need Dorans for the early lane. You can greed, tempo reset, come back, and get away with the Dark Seal start. And by the way, just Dark Seal start is just so much better than Dorans in nearly every single situation. Even the lanes that are going to be extended for a lot of other champions, like outside of Sylas, you could probably still get away with Dark Seal because the stats are so similar to Dorans. But most of the time, you're going to be going back for an early 400 gold reset. That's just the way the trading patterns work with Sylas. Level 4, level 5, or around usually level 3, level 4, you're going to be starting to heavy trade. I know Yukal, one of the best Sylases in the world, in my opinion, basically goes back for like a level 4 tempo reset nearly every single game for a Doran's Ring. And I personally am a big fan of the early Doran's Ring as well. It really bridges that gap between getting your first core item or being your lost chapter, and like allows you to not be too weak and also kind of solve some of your early mana problems. This again is situational. I know some other Sylas players just don't go for it. I think what I would recommend is you experiment around with it. If it clicks with your way of playing Sylas at your given rank in your given server, then go for it. If not, no stress. Look, here is another controversial topic. I personally don't like rushing tier 2 Ionian boots. I know they are very effective, as we can see here from this little table here. And a lot of people, again, overlook this. And this is why I also am a big fan of Cosmic Insight. So this table basically outlines the effectiveness or what the ability haste or summoner spell haste actually does for the summoners. So if we take a look at the main one, Flash. Flash is usually 300 seconds, 5 minutes, and it goes down just with Ionian boost to, it shaves off, like 35 seconds, and then it shaves off, like another 13 seconds with the Cosmic Insight. So if you have both of them, right, let's take a look at this. If you have both of them, you're shaving off, what's that? Over a minute. You're shaving off a minute and 10 seconds. What's that? Yeah, that's a minute and 10 seconds off your Flash. That is huge. That is massive. Now, for some players, they really value that, right? And they value the reduction on the ignite and the TP. But for me, I really like the raw AP. A lot of the time, I'll try and delay my tier 2 boots, and I'll try and get my Lost Chapter first. Because remember, with Sylas, the more AP, it doesn't just mean more damage. I view it very similar to Orianna with the E, where you actually get more healing. So it's more damage and more healing. And with Orianna, it's not just like the damage part of the E, it's that you get more shielding. The shielding is the important bit. You're getting actually more utility. So I love raw AP with Sylas. And again, that is an area that I would recommend you guys experiment with, see what feels best for you. Then ultimately, we want to be rushing this Everfrost. If you do end up getting around 8 to 10 stacks with your Dark Seal, I would suggest getting a Magi's because this champion is incredibly snowball oriented. And now again, another controversial little, I guess, crossroads here. The way I like to view it, and I spoke to a Sylas player on my server, a very good Sylas player, he likes to view it as greed versus no greed. If you can greed and get away with going Cosmic Drive and you're snowballing out of control, then Cosmic Drive is amazing. Your skirmishing goes through the roof, you become this unstoppable demon lord, you just get absolutely out of control if you can get away with it. But if the game is a little bit closer and maybe you need to create space, skirmishes are getting a little bit more extended and you need to ensure that you get your second rotation of healing down through your W, then Zhonya's is amazing. And the way the biggest reason I love Zhonya's personally is because I view it like Fizz. Fizz goes in for a combo because a lot of the time with Sylas, you're going in then out. So you're going in for that little burst trade, whatever, and then you're buying time with the Zhonya's, and then your W and E come back up, and then you can go for round 2, and then a lot of the time the Ignite's worn off, or the healing reduction, and you get that extra, and then you go for the second round of healing. So it makes your skirmishing a lot more effective. And also, if you're versing a lot of lethality / attack damage champions, obviously because you're getting HP from the Everfrost, that synergizes very well with armor, with added durability. So, yep, it's a win harder item. Again, another preferential thing. I would try both, see what feels best for you. But yeah, the greed versus no greed or win harder item is a good way of phrasing it. And then generally you want to go just death cap or voice stuff. But by this point, the game is just over. Very rarely you're going past three items as a Sylas. Now, moving on to ability identity. I love this part of the guide. It's probably one of my favorite parts of the guide. I think it's very important to understand what your abilities do and the intricacies of your abilities. Now, Sylas's W is basically everything. This is the core of Sylas's kit. Everything revolves around it, okay? Now, the lower you are, the more healing you get. This is capped at 60% missing HP, so you got to be a little bit careful and aware of how this interaction works. Now, this is where things get very messy with Sylas because there are going to be some matchups where you can actually start the fight with W, and because the trade goes on for so long, you actually get 2 Ws. So the way I view it is, if I know that the trade is going to be very extended, I'll actually start the fight with W, EW instantly, not hold on to it until I get low, knowing that the trade is going to be so long that I'm going to get a second W within the fight. Now, this is important because it drastically increases your ability to stack your Conqueror, which increases your damage massively. And again, because most of the time you're maxing it, it increases just your overall damage. So I find that people default to that mentality where it's like, oh no, I shouldn't use it when I'm full HP. I should wait till I'm low, then use it. But that's not always the case. It depends on the speed of the trades and those trading patterns in that specific matchup. So I think in matchups where you can stick onto them, then great, start with W. If not, you need a short little burst trade. Yeah, I'll just use it at the start, then get out. That sort of thing. Or sorry, wait to the end and then just quickly get out. So that's something I want you guys to experiment with. Do not view the W in a very one-dimensional manner. Now, the third little point here is that the W heal can actually be interrupted by CC, so you've got to be wary of that. And the last little point here, once you get enough levels and ability haste, you can actually open with W, like I said before, this ties into the second thing, to get a second W at the end. Again, look, as you play a lot of games with Sylas, you'll kind of notice specific levels being very impactful. So as a Sylas player, there's a big difference between having 3 points in your W versus 2. Or there's a big difference between having 3 points in your Q versus 2. Every single level and every single amount or little bit of ability haste matters a lot. And okay, and look, because Sylas, and I'm going to touch on this a lot throughout this guide, because Sylas is such a feel-oriented champion, I don't want to get you in the mentality where it's like, okay, at this level, I can do this, or at this item, I can do this. No, that's not a healthy way of viewing the champion. You've got to be very in the moment and understand it from a feel perspective, okay? And that is a trend or something a message I'm going to be reiterating a lot throughout this guide. Moving on. The E, Abscond Abduct, is a very high skill capability. It is simultaneously your self-peel and engage, very similar to Fizz E. Okay, so you've got to be careful with the way you use it. You must be actively hypothesizing how you are going to use it in a matchup. There are going to be some matchups where you can just go in with it proactively, not really waiting for a specific ability, just going in ham. Other matchups, you're going to have to use it reactively, right? You might have to, maybe you're versing, say, a Lux. You might have to use it reactively. Or maybe you're versing, I can't think off the top of my head, maybe Fizz. You're versing a Fizz. You don't want to E into a Fizz. You want to use your your E reactively to avoid the Fizz E. There are certain matchups you've got to be very careful. Again, this is why this ability is such a high skill cap one. And a lot of your early damage comes from the E2. Must not rush it, okay? Again, something I'm going to touch on later on. And be aware of the difference between the E cooldown compared to key self-peel abilities. So for example, let's say you're versing a Vladimir and the wave is on your side. You got to remember that your E is slightly lower cooldown than the Vladimir W. So it's okay to go in with your E, E2, force out the pull from the Vlad, knowing that the wave is still in that great position, and then you can rinse repeat. No, it's very similar to how Twist of Fate will use the gold card to get out the self-peel ability and then rinse repeat, knowing that his W is on a lower cooldown. Okay, very important you understand the key differences or the specific seconds in between the E and the key self-peel ability. Now for the hijack, the R. This is a very complex ability. There are a lot of miniature little interactions and things with certain abilities and certain champions that aren't that important but will be learned over time. If you're very interested in understanding the specifics and the niche little things like, oh, if I get, Jack's ultimate, I get his passive, or if I get Phoenix Stance from Udia, I get the passive, whatever it is. There's a lot of niche little things. Again, they're not too important. So don't put too much emphasis on that. Now, a few little points here. The R you have access to will largely dictate your role in fights. There's a very big difference between you having a Alistar ultimate versus having, I don't know, like a Zyra ultimate. The way you play fights is going to be very different. Maybe one's for peel and creating space. Maybe, and the other one might be for keeping the backline busy and allowing your front line, or your backline, sorry, to win the front to back team fight. I don't know. We're going to talk a lot about this within this video. Avoid hijacking key ultimates too early before major objectives. I've seen some Sylas players get in the nasty habit of just like instantly taking ultimates without even actually taking into consideration when the next objective is. You don't want to take that Malphite ultimate or that Amumu ultimate or that Kennen ultimate, 2 minutes before the dragon spawns. You want to make sure that you take it and that you have it available for when that dragon fight is about to happen. Quick roams into the jungle and side lanes to take a key ultimate is very viable. So if there's a great ultimate in the top lane, it's worth actually using a wave of priority to quickly ditch, go over, commit fully to that lane, grab the ultimate to come back. Not many people do that, but you definitely do see it with higher level Sylas players. And using R quickly in fights for an extra passive stack is better than nothing. I have seen certain situations with myself where I'm versing like a Zoe, right? And there's no good ultimates for me. Sometimes you can actually just quickly take it in the middle of the fight to help you stack Conqueror and just slap him to death with your passive. So something to keep in mind as well. So let's go ahead and actually take a look at the ultimate tier list. So I've actually had to break it up in 2 parts because the ultimate tier list is so big. I've actually included every single ultimate in the game, ranging from S being the best. I think it goes all the way down to D tier or something like that. Now, this has actually replaced my matchup tier list. And the reason I didn't do a matchup tier list for Sylas is because he's not really played for the 1v1 ever. Sylas can always minimize the 1v1. We'll get to that a little bit later on, but Sylas can always minimize the 1v1. Whether you need to put 3 points Q, whether you need to tempo reset a certain way, there's always ways to minimize. And again, Sylas isn't picked for the 1v1. You're picked for the 2v2s. You're picked for the 3v3s. You're picked for the team fights. Okay? He is not picked for lane. So all that's important is looking at the ultimates in the game. If you have good quality ultimates, you can always pick Sylas. Now, an important little note here, APR's ultimates are more valuable than AD due to the ratio being higher. So at the top, we have the game-changing ultimates. Now, if you see any of these ultimates on the enemy team, you can blind pick Sylas, especially Malphite and Ali. Now, I am of the opinion, and this is a bold claim. If you see an Alistar on the team, let's say you're actually on the team with the Alistar and the enemy picks Sylas, it is dodgeable. The game is genuinely dodgeable. Sylas with Alistar ult breaks the game. It breaks the game. It should not be allowed. They should probably disable it. I don't know what they need to do, but that ultimate is beyond. You can't deal with it. It's out of control. It just makes me laugh even thinking about it. But then we have the A+, very, very solid ultimates. As you can see here, a range of differing ultimates. Another ult that really caught me off guard is GP ult. GP ult, actually, I think it has a pretty good AP scaling on it. It's a very, very good ultimate. There's ones in here with no damage, but with a lot of utility, like Bard ult and Twisted Fate ultimate. And then, then there's the classic ones, like the Diana, the Lysandra, etc., etc. So, look, you can go through this in your own time. If you have any questions about any of these ultimates and why I put them in these specific areas, then feel free to hit me up in the comment section below. I'll try to get to as many of you as possible. The only one I'm actually just looking at right now that I'm just iffy on is I think Zyra ult is actually just shit. It's just terrible. So I would actually put that into D tier. Yes, you can create space with it theoretically, but I'm just not a big fan of it. But if you have any other questions, let me know. And yeah, I'll try to get to as many of you as possible. Now, moving on to Sylas's early laning. The way I like to view Sylas's early laning is that there's two modes, okay? Or two different types of matchups. There's the fast-paced proactive matchups, and then there's more like the reactive matchups. And these reactive matchups can actually be either slow or fast. It really depends on what the enemy and how the enemy plays it, and if they misplay, how they play the waves, how they use their abilities. But because Sylas, in those counter matchups, you're just simply reactive, you don't really have a choice. You have to just do whatever the enemy allows you to do, okay? Now, for these fast-paced and proactive matchups, these are generally the ones where they have very low CC or low mobility, where you can just look for aggressive level 1 E trades. This allows you to try and get that level 2 first, where you can play super aggressive and really push the pace of the lane, okay? And we're actually going to cover one of these lanes later on in the VOD review section, where I'm going to go over a Sylas v Akali game, where I really go through this and really outline how to play this style. Now, a very important to remember tip: trades are more important than CS because XP is the most important thing in the game for Sylas, not gold. Now, let me explain this. Let's say you have a minion here, I don't know how to draw a minion. You got a little minion here, and then we have an opponent. We have like a champion. Now we have a choice, and I've mentioned this in one of my I think it was one of my recent videos, the importance of actually going for the trade rather than the CS. Now this is even more important for Sylas, because if you go for the trade and take you go for the CS and you get chunked for it, and then we do this, maybe do this 3 times in a row or 4 times in a row, what happens is that inevitably you're going to have to take a bad reset, or you're going to lose control over the wave state, or you're going to get zoned from XP. Something bad will happen that will result in a loss of XP. Now, because of how well Sylas scales with levels and how you'd never want to get under-leveled with Sylas, I'm like, screw it. If I have to give a CS, I will. Because I want to ensure that I'm able to match that pressure. I'm willing to take those traits even at the sacrifice of the CS, the gold. Because then I'm going to have a little bit more control over the lane. I'm going to have better quality resets. And then screw it. If I come back with a double Amp Tomb over a Lost Chapter, so be it. as long as I value my XP. And this is a very important concept to understand. Now, tempo resets in these fast and proactive lanes are very important and recommended in order to make use of your refillable and dark seal start. And note, 95% of UCal's games, he bases it around 3 minutes for a Dorian's and Amp Tomb. And ensure you are not using your Q just permanently on waves, because it will limit your ability to stack your Conqueror and will lessen your kill threat. Again, that's a very common mistake I see with Sylas players. They just constantly use their Q on the wave. I'm like, dude, if you actually save it for the trade itself, it's going to allow you to stack your Conqueror, and especially in these fast and proactive matchups, that can be the difference between winning or losing the trade, especially when you have Ignite. Now for the reactive and slow pace matchups. This is often the case when you're versing laners that have a lot of control over the lane, usually with hard CC. Zoe is a perfect example, and in these sorts of lanes, you really need to use your E reactively. I can't use my E proactively into a Zoe, otherwise I'm just going to get bubbled and I'm going to get shit on. You can't do that. Now, another little note here is that Sylas is best at level 4, and the best Sylases are okay at missing CS to conserve HP to trade, just like I said before. Again, I'm just reiterating the same point here. Now, again, in these matchups, you generally want to be using Q to last hit in a non-committal fashion / thin waves. These are some of the matchups where you can actually go 3 points Q, just so you can get through the early laning phase, but we're going to continue to talk about that throughout this guide. And ensure you are staying poised and actively identifying the ability that is preventing you from using E aggressively. Now, let's say you were versing a Zoe, and the Zoe randomly went for a very 50-50 bubble. Now, in this situation, and they miss it, you got to be ready to go and get ready to E aggressively as soon as they miss it. You might be in the mentality, I've seen this before with Sylas players, and I've done this myself. You come in with this very fixed mindset where it's like, okay, I can't use my E. I need to minimize. I need to get to X item. I need to get to this level. But then they just mess up in front of your face. And they don't capitalize. And I'm thinking, why didn't I go here? It's because I had a fixed mindset. I was too rigid in my thinking. And this is why you got to be very specific about what ability is preventing you from using your E aggressively. Identify it, bring it to the top of the mental stack, and then as soon as they use it, go, go, go. Capitalize. And the other last little tip here is ensure you stay either healthy enough for the 2v2 or reset before the 2v2 occurs. Like I said before, Sylas' identity all revolves around skirmishing and 2v2s. He's not picked for the 1v1, okay? Now, if you get low and lower and lower, and you're sitting under your tower getting poked up the ass, lower and lower and lower, and you stay in lane with low HP, what happens? Well, even when your jungler comes to bail you out and take the 2v2, you're too low to fight. That is the worst case scenario, okay? And this also kind of ties into this one here. If you're constantly going for CS and getting too low and you can't skirmish, again, your champion doesn't have an identity. So you must either reset before you believe the 2v2 is going to occur or stay healthy enough and sacrifice that CS. Very important to understand. Now for some early lane tips. Very important stuff here. Remember, a lot of people don't know this. Your passive has an execute on minions when they're low, as you can see here. So damage to secondary targets, execute minions below 25 HP. This synergizes very well with E when you're posturing aggressively for all in. So level 1, for example, in those proactive lane matchups, you're going to have the 3 melees here. Now, this one's going to get low at the same time. So they're all going to be very low, right? This one is going to get to 50 HP, and then they're all going to be very, very low. The great thing about it is a lot of the time people are going to be standing behind it, the minions, but you can catch them off guard by Eing, and then your execute, or your passive will actually execute the rest of them. And then you can go for a nice E into E2. And note, your E2 does a lot of damage level 1, level 2. And that's where a lot of your early damage comes from. And if you're able to land that E2, that can be the difference between winning or losing the trade. So not a lot of people know about that. Stay vigilant. You might verse another laner who this is what I said before. You never planned on playing aggressive, but then they end up using their key self-peel ability on the wave. You must be ready to punish. Don't be afraid to heavy trade. Post level 3 and 4. I see way too many low elo Sylas players pussy out, and they don't utilize the inherent strength of the kit. For some reason, they're in this mentality where it's like, hey, I scale. I've got to get to my lost chapter. I can't farm. No. Once you're level 3, level 4, you should be looking to E aggressively, heavy trade, and make use of your W. You have one of the most ridiculous form of sustain abilities in the entire game, and no one has healing reduction this early in the game, right? It's not like they have an Executioners or an Oblivion Orb yet. Your W is very strong, especially at level 4 when you have the 2 points in your W. Pay attention to both junglers pathing in the early game to determine the likelihood of a scuttle fight. Right? This can ensure you are actually primed mentally to get to the fight ASAP. Try to refrain putting points in queue unless you really, really need to. I see way too many people put points in queue unnecessarily when they don't need to. You can get away with it with better quality micro, better quality resets. You've got to understand the sacrifice of putting these points into queue because, look, I very rarely do it. I know there are other Sylas players that put 3 points in queue quite often. For me, I'm of the mind that screw it. I mean, I would rather have a weak early lane and then, get a little bit behind, but have a clearer identity and much stronger 2v2 against skirmishing because that's all leaning on my identity. I'll just improve my micro, improve my faking CS, improve my dodging of skill shots, all this stuff, my tethering, just so I can survive and get max value from my kit. So again, that really does come down to preference and your interpretation of the champ's identity. Now the last little point here, again, inexperienced Sylas players will not give farm. It is basically inevitable that you will not have perfect farm on Sylas. Please stop trying to get 8 to 10 CS per minute on Sylas every single game. Okay? It's just not going to happen. Your champion, like I said many times already in this guide, please do not go for every single little bit of CS. It's okay. It's normal. Okay? You're not going to have amazing farm, but you shouldn't have... It doesn't mean you should have terrible farm, but it means you're going to have average farm between 6 and 7. Okay, very important to internalize. Now, when it comes to skirmishing with Sylas, he really is unlike any other champion in the entire game. I guess the closest one may be Viego, but this is because his identity and role in fights truly revolves around the ultimates that he has access to. And because he has such a versatile identity that is, very, I guess, dependent on these ultimates, his role in fights or role within the game will change throughout the game itself. So at the beginning, in the first 15 minutes, you might have a very dive-oriented, backing up your Camille in the backline role in fights. And then you might realize, oh shit, I can actually take this other ultimate and actually peel for my AD carry in these fights instead. So it might change throughout the game based on a range of differing things. You've got to keep it an extremely open mind. So when I'm reviewing my skirmishes with Sylas, these are the things that I tend to look for. Was there a way to make my engages less linear or less foreseeable? Because I would say Sylas is a relatively linear champion. If you're coming out of vision and they see exactly where you are, generally, if you just E forwards, just like, if you're playing like a Fizz and you're queuing forwards, or playing like a Z and you're Wing forwards, it's very easy for you to get CC'd, locked down, and just bursted. So what I will try to do in my reviews is look for, okay, could I have sat out of vision a little longer? Could I use my E in a more unpredictable manner? Could I have got to the fight a little bit earlier in order to get myself in a position where it isn't as foreseeable? This is something that I'll actively ask myself. Was I aware of how to use my E in fights? Was there a specific ability I needed to avoid that I wasn't aware of? Should I have used it more proactively because they had actually used already their self-peel abilities? Or should I have been using it a little bit more reactive to X ability? So being aware of this within the game is very important as well. Was my positioning before the fight coherent with my identity given the R that I had access to? So a lot of the time, given that your role in fights changes, given the access to ultimates that are within that game, your positioning also should change, right? Because a Fizz in fights doesn't position the same as, say, an Orianna in fights. But because Sylas can feel both, depending on the ultimates and depending how the game pans out, your positioning before fights should be very different. This is something I will actively look for in my reviews. Was I aware of which Rs I could have or couldn't have taken based off the cooldown? And could I have optimized my R usage in any way? Now, this is a very open-ended question. There are a lot of ways to optimize your R usage here. And again, my biggest advice for this one is have fun with it. Play around. You are going to make the most ridiculously stupid mistakes ever. You're going to look like a meme. Embrace it. It's okay. Trust me, if you could see some of my first games with Sylas, I'll probably be out of a job, honestly. It's not looking good. So trust me, have fun with this one. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at two specific examples of differing skirmishes. One of one of my own VODs, one from a client in the Midland Academy, to encapsulate that I think encapsulate two important to understand concepts with Sylas when it comes to skirmishing. Now, in this first skirmish here, this was actually of one of my Midland Academy clients. He had a very strong Caitlyn on his team. And one thing that I think he did very well in this fight was peel for his Caitlyn. So as soon as the Kiana dove in, he instantly used his E defensively like that and peeled for his Caitlyn and held his E2. I love the way he was doing that. And he was just sitting in front of his Caitlyn, going on to the next target, and then going next. And as this fight continues on, he was actively processing the fact that his Caitlyn was a strong member. I was a little bit iffy with this positioning here. I think he probably should have been on the same side of the wall as the Caitlyn. But again, same thing. He was peeling, playing with the Caitlyn, and he had a very clear identity in this fight, and I really enjoyed the way he played it. Yes, I think there's little room for improvement, but as you can see here, he wasn't going forwards with his E. He wasn't continuing to dive onto the Gragas and the Thresh as soon as he saw the counter, because he could have theoretically continued to go forwards there. His E was coming up in like a second. No, default response, peel back. Very, very clear identity in, and he actually correctly identified his role in this fight. Now, the other little example I'm going to show here is of me playing Sylas. Now, I play this skirmish pretty terribly from a mechanical standpoint, but what I wanted to get across here is how you can properly utilize stopwatch. I actually don't even utilize my stopwatch perfectly, but the theory, what I was explaining within the itemization section really becomes apparent. So here I was trying to get Prio for midwave before the dragon spawns, but the enemy Kled ends up engaging. It's a bit of a chaotic split fight. I end up trying to go for a bit of a play onto this Kai'Sa. I misplaced my Q. End up using my Zillion ult a little bit early, but I end up peeling back, doing classic Sylas things with the Zillion ult. Didn't realize that this Lee Sin had more than Zillion double bomb me. Now take a look at this. I used everything, right? I didn't have any of my abilities available. I'm getting now targeted by the enemy Zillion. Kled's trying to jump onto me, etc., etc. Now, in a game where maybe they have more damage or, you know, I could get bursted right now, simply using your stopwatch to buy time for your W and E to come back off cooldown is game changing. Now in this scenario, look, I probably could have just still survived anyway, maybe not, I'm unsure. But this allowed me to buy time to have my W to get back on cooldown. And look, I survived for a little bit longer than maybe I could have. And yes, I played this skirmish pretty terrible. But the actual theory behind utilizing my stopwatch to buy time for my cooldowns is something that I want a lot of you guys to actively think about in your skirmishes. So Zhonya's usage is something within the skirmishing that you need to look for. Could you have could you have used your Zhonya's in a better way to create space? Could you have actually had a different role in the fight itself because you had access to a stopwatch? I don't know. Something that you guys need to look for because it does buy time for a second rotation of abilities, just like it does with Fizz. Now for some common mistakes I see with Sylas players, myself included. The first one, incorrectly using Everfrost or actually not using Everfrost at all. I'm actually guilty of not using Everfrost. I forget about it sometimes because I'm thinking about my positioning, my W cooldown, how much heal cut they have. Should I use my W first or later on? Things like that. My mental stacks gets a bit exploded, but if you do end up using it, I do see a lot of mistakes with it. Ideally, or the best case scenario is that you E1, then you Q for the slow, then you Everfrost because they're slow. It allows you to hit your Everfrost, close the gap. Then you E2 because they're CC'd, then you W. Okay, you can also start it with W, so on and so forth. But the main thing I want you guys to avoid is not starting with Everfrost because it's way too unreliable to hit, okay? Only if they are already CC'd. Now for the second big mistake is not staying healthy enough for the 2v2s. I mentioned this earlier on in the guide, but I see way too many Sylases just slowly lose the lane, and then finally their junglers come in order, to win a 2v2, but they're too low. So if you're getting poked out in the lane and then you're staying in lane when you're low, you just don't have an identity because your entire Sylas, what Sylas is as a champion is skirmishing, is 2v2ing, is river fights, etc. You must stay healthy enough to skirmish even at the sacrifice of farm sometimes. Opting in for 3 points Q unnecessarily. This can be actually good against some orb buyers. So if you're in the Akali matchup, for example, post 6, as soon as Akali post first base as well, as soon as Akali comes back with an orb, you're actually not going to win the W trades anymore. You're actually completely screwed. So a lot of the time you need to minimize. So 3 points Q can actually work. You can actually go 3 points Q into some very heavy poke matchups when you don't have a gank-oriented jungler, when you know you're going to be stuck in an isolated lane for a very long time. But I see people kind of bitch out and still do it when they could easily get away with 3 points W or maxing W. So again, something for you guys to consider. Rushing E2, a huge learning objective for me. I still, for some reason, can't get over this. Look, it's a common problem. I would say a solid 85% of Sylas players I watch have this problem to differing degrees. I myself, I find myself just Eing and then E2ing instantly. I'm not good at holding it. I think it's just going to come with time, you know, as I develop champion mastery. This is something that if you are newer to Sylas, I would recommend directing a lot of attention towards it, because your E2 changes your trading patterns massively. It allows you to close the gap to land your W. It allows you to stack your Conqueror stacks more. And the E2 damage itself is huge. It's a massive one. Please slow it down. E, hold, relax, E2. Don't E2 instantly. It's not a good habit to get into. Next one, failing to identify windows to E aggressively based off their concrete mindset. I mentioned that a few times. I don't think I need to go on about that. Unwilling to heavy trade and use too much mana on the wave. Again, I mentioned before, a very nasty habit. Playing too fast in team fights, a very rookie mistake. I found myself making this one a few times as well. Earlier on in my Sylas journey, I was just going in. I'm like, okay, I'm Sylas. I need a team fight, skirmish, go, 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 go. But no, that's not even how you team fight on champions like Fizz that have great skirmishing. You take it slow. You find the right moment. You identify, wait for them to waste their self-peel. You identify your role correctly. Or you go in, wait for that little moment, then Zhonya's, then go for round 2. You take it a little bit patiently. Look, this is a very general statement to make. For some people, it might not even mean anything. I tried to keep it general because it's more of a feeling. When you come into a team fight, are you trying to rush it and go and do this all fast? Or are you taking it slow, trying to focus specifically on where your window is, your positioning before the fight, actively identifying the ultimate that you need to take? How are you going to use your E? Proactively, reactively? Are you going to peel? Are you going to dive? Diving and going fast is only one way of playing the team fight. Situationally, that might be the way to go. Other situations, not so much. Now, one last little misconception here. It's not really a mistake, more of a misconception. Sylas doesn't always scale. He's very dependent on the compositions. If you don't have access to good ultimates, say you're versing like an Udyr, I can't think off the top of my head, like a composition, or like even like a composition that doesn't have many good ultimates, Sylas doesn't scale. If he doesn't win skirmishes, he doesn't win team fights, he doesn't really have an identity. He needs to have access to good ultimates. It's a common misconception because some people think, it's okay, I spike it 2 items. No, that's just not always the case. Now, look, I wasn't initially planning on doing a how to counter Sylas section of this guide. I was thinking of making a separate video, and I still might, right? I still might make a separate video for this. But because in the comment section of the YouTube, a lot of people said, Curtis, how to counter Sylas? How do I counter Sylas? I thought I'd give at least a few pragmatic tips to really get you guys on the right path when you do encounter Sylas. And the first one, do whatever you can to get the wave on your side near the tower, in the early lane, okay? Because Sylas hates having the wave stuck on the enemy's side because he's terrible at unfreezing, and he doesn't have any room to use his E and chase you down the long lane. And even if he does use his E aggressively, he's incredibly susceptible to getting counter-traded, traded on the back end, or just dying to ganks. So ideally, you want the wave on your side. That is the biggest tip I can give in the early game versing Sylas. Buy early healing reduction. Again, I'm going to go a lot deeper because there's the specifics you need to understand about this. If you're interested in this, go to the community Q&A. I'm going to answer that on a little bit later. Third little tip, isolate the lane if you cannot win the 2v2 nor have gank threat. Okay, so most champions, look, there are specific counter picks I'm going to get to in a second where you can win the 2v2 and that these make very great Sylas counters. But if you don't win the 2v2, nor do you have gank threat, isolate the lane. We do this through matching the lane pace. We do this through good quality wards. We do this through forcing R for R trades, trying to keep Sylas interested and not roaming around the map, and walking that tightrope where I am trying to match some of that early pressure, play aggressive enough to keep him interested in me, but not so aggressive such that I die, right? And that tightrope is aggression on one side to keep him interested and defense on the other side. You've got to really walk that tightrope. And what I mean by match lane pace is basically match tempo. If they want to trade and do things, don't bitch out. Just take tempo resets and come back and make sure you're heavy trading to keep them interested. Because if you don't, then they're just going to roam and they're just going to do whatever you want. You cannot give too much free pressure. Most of the early unfavorable trades will fall into one of 2 buckets. You will either get hit by the E2 and lose the trade regardless, in which you need to stand behind your minions and position appropriately or have the wave in a better position, or you avoid the E2, but you fail to extend the trade and poke him on the back end. Okay, so if he misses his E2, Sylas is very susceptible. He's very kiteable. Okay, so this is something to keep in mind. So, these are the 2 areas that I'll look for if you are losing trades. It's probably going to fall into one of these 2 buckets. okay? A lot of it revolves around the E2. But again, I'm probably going to make a video on this in the future. It's very matchup specific. There are a lot of little things I need to go into that it's too much to cover in this one video. Now for the item journey, and for those of you who don't know how this works, basically the point of it is to give you a little bit of a reference point in terms of when Sylas is strong, weak, average comparatively to other champions in the game. Orange basically means that you're kind of average, you're not strong, you're not weak. This light green means that you're definitely not weak, but you're not super strong. You're kind of just a little bit strong. And then the dark green means you've definitely spiked. And comparatively to other champions in the game, you're going to be rock and rolling. And this was very hard to do because it is quite situational depending on the champion in the game. But I did want to still do it regardless, just to give you a slight, vague reference point. So I've got dark still, relatively average. Orange, you start to get a little bit strong. You can actually do things. That's why I actually like going orange in the first place. You have a little dip again before your Lost Chapter. Lost Chapter, your major component, very important for Sylas, great for the ability haste and raw AP and access to mana. And then Everfrost is your big boy item. The utility, the ability haste. This is when Sylas really starts to have a clear identity. Then you have a little dip again, and then we spike hardcore at 2 items. This is when Sylas is at his peak. Once you get these 2 items combined, you're rock and rolling. This is when you can start to really do some work. So this is the way I interpret it. I know it's very vague. For some of you, it may be useless, but I thought I would kind of add in here regardless. Now, look, this is what I wanted to do instead of the tier list. Right? These are champions to look out for in other roles, okay? So these are other mid champions that I think give Sylas the most trouble. Now, I initially thought Zoe was going to be a pretty hard counter to Sylas. Now, yes, it is a pretty good lane counter. You definitely counter Sylas in the laning phase. But the problem with Zoe is that Sylas still wins 2v2s. Okay? Now, my little point here I was going to make is that a lot of these are still harder than 1v1. Although they're definitely harder than 1v1, but they still win the 2v2. Right? So, Renekton and Viego are bad for Sylas for 2 reasons. They win the 1v1. Viego and Renekton beat Sylas in the 1v1, and they still win the 2v2 most of the time. That's what makes them so dangerous. All of these other ones, Sylas can still outplay them in 2v2s. So yes, I would call them more like soft counters, whereas these two I would say are the hard counters. If the proposed Viego nerf goes through where they're reducing his sustain, then it might change. But Renekton will definitely still be a consistent counter pick to Sylas mid. Now for junglers, I would say these are the only 2 that really give me trouble. I mean, Kindra's more of a pain in the ass because it's really difficult to hit the E2 and Kindra can kind of just kite you out. You can't stick on him. Olaf, for obvious reasons, an incredibly strong skirmisher and kind of beat you down. And then Fiora and Aurelia. Look, I might just have a mental block. I can't stand versus these champions as Sylas. I do know Aurelia ult is quite good for Sylas, but in terms of the 1v1, because they build so much lifesteal, you just don't win the extended trade. You don't win the 1v1, so I find them quite problematic as well. Now for learning Sylas, I love making these slides. I think this is probably one of the most important slides in the entire guide. So I try to break this down into the first 25 games, 25 to 40, and then 40 plus. So in your first 25 games with Sylas, you need to be limit testing. Right? Chaotic level 3-4 trades. You got to feel out the durability. You got to feel out the healing. You got to feel out your damage with the W and the Conqueror. Go crazy. Right? I want you to go sicko mode. I don't want you to think. I want you to just feel it out into intuition. Just limit test. I want you to die. I want you to just make silly mistakes. It's what it's all about. Actively push limits in the 2v2, right? Whenever there's a 2v2, go in there, go hard. Experiment with the damage outputs with differing Rs. Occasionally contrast the fast-paced chaotic style with the slow, calculated, perfect farm style of Sylas to get a bit of a comparison going. So then you might try it out, right? So you might have this game where you listen to me and you go crazy, level 3-4 trades, your CS is relatively low, you don't really get to your Everfrost, the game explodes, whatever. But then conversely, I want you to try a much slower, calculated approach to get to your Lost Chapter, Everfrost, and 2 items spike very conservatively, just so you can see where I'm coming from and why I interpret Sylas the way he is and why he is played the way he is. So it's very important to just get a feel of both sides. It's something that I would recommend doing. Now, when you're 25 games deep here, we should begin to compartmentalize matchups into 2 differing strategies, the contest level 1 or not, like I said earlier on. And really getting a clear understanding of how you want to play the waves in the matchup specifically. I want you to begin to hypothesize your role in fights more accurately based off your access to specific Rs. Because right now, you should understand what the Rs do, how they operate with your champion, etc., etc. But now we got to use that information to dictate and have a hypothesis about your role. This is when we've got to go that next level deeper. Skirmishing is gonna be a big part of this little transition period between 25 to 40 games. And you should begin to identify junglers that you do and don't synergize well with. You got to become the master of knowledge in regards to 2v2s. Do we win the 2v2? Do we lose a 2v2? How should we play the 2v2? Your entire focus should be focused around those 2v2s, understanding the mid jungle to a high degree. Now, when you're 40 games deep, this is where the in-depth assessment of skirmishes and team fights, both win cons and role and positioning pre-fight, come into play. Okay, classic, as we do on most other champions, we really need to get clear about our role, what our win cons are, how we need to play fights, getting very creative, very in-depth with a lot of this information. We also got to understand the intricacies of matchups, the skill orders, builds, looking for creative trading patterns. You might have a stock standard way of approaching Sylas via Kali, but then you, after testing and doing a series of 1v1s, you get more specific. Like, oh, interesting, I can actually play it this way if I hold the wave here, and I can get away with not putting points into my queue. Or I can get away with going a differing build path and playing this a little bit differently. Okay, so this is where I want you to start to experiment with the intricacies of the matchups. And the last little point here, know how to be both the carry and the secondary carry, or facilitator flawlessly. You're not going to be the carry every single game as Sylas. Some games you're going to be the secondary carry. Some games you're going to be purely a facilitator. You got to know exactly how, not only when to take upon these roles, and how you need to know how to execute it flawlessly. Now, tips for learning Sylas. There are many great Sylas players. Every man and their dog is playing Sylas at the moment, especially in high elo, like China and Korea and EU. But the one I personally enjoy the most is UCal. It's his most played. He's got a 60% win rate over 255 games played, sitting at around 1300 LP right now. Amazing player to watch. You can literally go to a League of Graphs and look at his recently played games, or you can even type on YouTube UCal Sylas. I'm sure there's plenty of VODs that will come up. Now, Sylas is a field champion. I've said this a lot throughout this guide, but you can learn champions like Twisted Fate via YouTube quite well because they're very theory-oriented. And they've got a simple, mechanically played that's relatively simple. But Sylas is not a theory champion. You've got to be a practitioner. You must play the game. Okay, you must play. And then play again, and then play some more. Please, please, please do not look at your stats. You're going to have high deaths. You're going to lose games at level 3 and 4. You will throw games with insanely large leads. Experiment with both maxing E and Q second to see which one is best for you, okay? Now, I personally max E second now all the time. I used to max Q second. Look, E is better for mobility and skirmishing. Q is better for damage, and especially when you're in extended laning phase, it can really help with, minimizing thinning waves, etc. It really depends on how chaotic the game is, how extended the laning phase is, and how important that mobility in teamfights is for you as well. And if you think you're going to be going in with one rotation killing someone, or the fight's going to be extended, really depends on you. So now what we're going to do is take a look at a full game review. This was a recent game I played versus a pro player. Very chaotic matchup, Sylas versus Akali. So let's dive straight in. Now with this VOD review, I'm actually going to do it a little differently than to what I've done in my past guides. I'm actually going to go a little bit more in depth. I found this VOD to be super interesting because I make a lot of mistakes. Now, instead of just skipping over the mistakes or briefly touching on the mistakes, I'm going to talk about how these mistakes might apply in your own games, how these might be mistakes that you make yourself, how you can go about reviewing them, how you can go about approving upon them yourself, and really go very in depth. I don't think I played this game that well. We end up winning and I end up having a pretty good scoreline, but I think it could have easily gone the other way if things just panned out a little bit differently. So let's dive in. It's going to be an interesting one. Again, if you have any questions about anything I review in this game, feel free to, again, let me know in the comment section below. So just as a starting point here, the theory behind this matchup. A lot of people have differing opinions on this matchup. Now, the way I interpret it is that pre-6, pre-first base, Sylas should win. This Akali ended up taking Ignite and TP, which is very good for the laning phase. And even despite that, even though she does have the Ignite advantage, I'm quite confident in my ability to utilize my W earlier on. I don't think she's going to have enough energy to kill me, especially without the ultimate. And even when she does get the ultimate, I don't think it's going to be enough without that healing reduction that she will get from orb. But post 6, post orb, post first base, then the matchup actually shifts quite a bit. Now, when you're playing Sylas, these matchup intricacies are quite important because, again, it will dictate how you play the lane, whether you play, tying back to the early lane strategy slide within the guide. 1, very proactive, using your E quite aggressively, willing to heavy trade chaos, versus 2, a little bit more conservatively, reactively to the enemy. Because this will mean, can you look for a level 1-2 trade? Yes or no? Do I have to allow myself to get shoved in, play off the bounced wave? These are the sorts of questions you need to be asking yourself in a given matchup. So here, I knew that Akali was going to be looking for Q poke onto me. So what I was trying to do, I was actually trying to bait out the Q. And as you can see, this Akali's micro is actually really good. Definitely better than mine. He's actually a pro player, but I noticed that he was standing too close to the minion that was about to die. So I was able to finish off the minion with my E, take the Q trade to the face because I was able to get an E and E2 auto attack, which is great for me. Now, again, I'm still trying to bait out that Q a little bit. So as I'm kind of walking back and forth, my micro is a little bit sloppy today, but the premise still remains the same. Take a little bit of a Q for the face for the minion. I know that she was going to get the level 2 first, so I didn't end up going for that range creep. End up avoiding that Q with my E quite nicely. Now I get level 2. Now this is where I'll stand my ground. I'm happy to take a trade into the Akali, even at the sacrifice of like a pretty bad trade, because I can turn around like this and just get most of my HP back. And she doesn't have enough energy to extend the trade. So for me, in terms of wave management, I just like to keep it in the middle or slightly on my side in these chaotic matchups. And look, notice I'm actually not even using my pot straight away, because I know I can heal back up with my W. I don't really need to use my pot straight away in a matchup like this, especially these lower range ones, because I'm able to proc my W quite reliably. I'm not rushing in to throw my Q. I'm happy with the wave state. Last hit with my Q there. Wave's in a beautiful position. I'm trying to bait out that Q, but she's doing a really good job of holding. Nice little heavy trades here. Look at that. Stand my ground. Now let's actually break down this trade. And this is a perfect example of a trade where I actually use my W very early on here. Just for the Conqueror stack, so I can just stand my ground. Look at that, boom. And then with the Q there, and we get instantly pretty close to nearly 12 stacks, I get to 10 stacks. So now I'm starting to pop some of my pots. And the reason I'm starting to pop some of my pots now is because, yes, I could theoretically, if she didn't have TP, I could kind of conserve my pots. But at the end of the day, I'm nearing my level 4. Level 4, I'm probably going to be looking for a tempo reset. Ideally, right now, if the jungler wasn't invading, I'd turn this into, I'd probably hard shove, trade my HP for the wave, and then tempo reset so I don't even have to use my TP, and then come back with the Dorians. That would be the goal here. And also, but because she does have Ignite, I need to stay healthy enough such that I'm not in kill threat range. But then here I make quite a big mistake. I literally did not see, and this is probably one of my biggest mistakes this game, I had no idea that Udyr was invading here. No idea. I wasn't in La La Land. I was just focusing really intensely on my 1v1s, and this is because I don't have I don't have hundreds of games on Sylas yet, so I'm focusing really, really hard on my matchups, and that's what my learning objective is on Sylas, really getting into the details of my matchups. And Echo didn't ping until way too late, so I unfortunately didn't back up my jungler, which is my bad. And then here, I quickly tried to get this wave out with a Q, and then so I can tempo reset. But then what happens is that I kind of disrespect the Udyr, and then I end up having to blow my flash here. And I thought that I just wasn't in kill threat range between my W, but it is what it is. And so I make a pretty big misplay there. And this is what I love about this VOD. I get pretty behind in the early game. I mean, I'm forced to blow my flash and TP, and I didn't even back up my jungler. Now my jungler's completely screwed. Now, anyway, come back with the Dorans. This is generally what I'll do most games. Ideally, I'll conserve my TP, but sometimes I don't have a choice. Whenever I see a potential river skirmish, I'm going. Now, this is a great principle, especially with Sylas, to get into, is whenever I see a skirmish, even if I'm unsure about what's going to happen, what you should look to do is walk, then pan your camera, then decide along the way. That's it. Now, I didn't know if I was going to commit, so I'm just walking down, and I can always turn back and go back mid, you know? I don't need to commit. End up getting a nice little ward out to spot the blue. Echo looks to try and get some revenge by looking to take away that blue, and I really wanted to make sure I was there for some of that XP, but I knew that because it was an invade, yes, I'm going to lose a bit of XP, but I had to help my jungler here because I already screwed him over before. So it turns into a little bit of a chaotic skirmish, and just sort of diving forward into the backline with my team. End up getting a nice little kill into the Udyr, and then instantly getting back out because I know we can't win that fight. My cooldowns are way too high. I have my double boss. I need to go back to mid-wave. Nothing for me to do there. So as you can see, this is a pretty chaotic game, which I love. Yeah, it's not amazing because our team's dying and looks like Echo's making a bunch of tilt plays, which I don't blame him for. You know, I don't mind this bit of chaos, but this is amazing for me. Now, one thing I want to highlight in this game, very important to note, because of that whole early game shenanigans at level 3-4 with the Udyr came into me and Akali missed a lot of CS, Akali didn't actually go back to base with enough gold for an orb, which means her first recall was actually an amp tomb. Now, if you're versing any of these low range matchups and they don't buy first item healing reduction, you just win. You just straight up win. Now, Akali here, not only do I have doubles, look at that. She came back with an amp tomb. She didn't have enough gold for the Oblivion Orb. So I'm in an incredibly good position here. Beautiful. And now I just want to keep the wave here. I love the wave, the position it's in. I've got my double buffs. I know that Akali doesn't have Oblivion Orb. I'm killing it. Beautiful position. Now, this is... Okay, look at that. Boom. What was the key mistake here? I'm going to give you 2 seconds to quickly answer. What was the key mistake with this trade? Rushing E2. Bad, bad, bad. Don't make this mistake. This is something that this is a mistake I continue to make. You guys need to prevent yourself from making it. So here, for example, the wave's in a beautiful position. Akali's forced to walk up to break the freeze. Look what I do. E. All I got to do is E, walk up a little bit, then W, then walk up, then E2, rather than randomly throw out my E2, rushing it, and this would have been a lot better. Wave's still in a pretty good position. Udyr comes through to try and fix the wave. Not much we can do here, though. Because I know I can't go into that Udyr. And I got question mark pinged in. There's just no way I can go into that Udyr. Even if I got the W there, I would get stunned. It wasn't going to work out well. And then Wave's still in a good spot. Okay, and then I catch this under tower. I quickly get the wave out and go for a nice little reset. Nothing too fancy. So I'm able to go back for a lost chapter straight up. Now, this is something that very rarely happens. It's very rare that I'm able to stay in lane long enough to get a straight up lost chapter. But I happened to in this game. Now, this is where the matchup gets a little tricky, though, because the Akali now has level 6. She has her Ignite back up, and then she also has an Oblivion Orb. And this is where the matchup actually turns into Akali favored. So fast forwarding a little bit here. Now, the mentality I adopt in this situation is, look, I'm chilling. All I want to do is continue to focus on being at every single skirmish that occurs. Continue to farm as best as I can. And play for 2v2s if possible. I don't really want to play for the 1v1s. Now here, look at that. I don't want to take long extended trades with the Akali anymore because of the Oblivion Orb. So notice what I'm doing. I'm just instantly taking nice little short trades. Look at this, boom. Walk up. Start the fight with my W. And then I can disengage with my E. These are the sorts of trades you probably want to be looking to do into these matchups that actually rush Oblivion Orb. And this is why I like to put, the points at W as well. You just got to adapt your trading. So game is in a pretty good state. Bot lane is doing well. Seems like it. Udyr is quite strong, but Kale's going to be doing Kale things, as you guys have all probably experienced. Now, I remember this situation here. I see a bit of a top skirmish, but I didn't think it was going to be extended, so I'm just chilling here with the Akali. Okay. Prepare yourselves, guys. So what I'm going to do, preface what you're about to see with the fact that my R wasn't on smart cast. So I was pressing the R, but nothing was happening. Now here, I can genuinely kill this Akali. I can actually kill this Akali 100 to 0 here, I'm pretty sure. But what happened is I was tethering her Q perfectly here, and then I ended up pressing R. I was pressing R here, but what happened is that my R wasn't on smart class, so I got nothing from it. So then, by the time I pressed the R, it was too late, and I just couldn't kill her. So I was forced to then disengage from the fight. So I think this would work, and the reason I think I saw this as a kill opportunity was because she was too deep in the lane, and I knew we were in an isolated 1v1. Usually I wouldn't go for a play like this, but I think it's because I had the level advantage. I had the straight up lost chapter. I knew we were in an isolated 1v1. She was pretty overextended in the lane. She doesn't have flash as well. So I just felt like I could go for it. This is a bit of a limit test. I usually wouldn't go for a play like this. Usually this is when Akali would win the 1v1. And as you can see here, if I misplay, I just lose. Because I have to go for the burst. And if I don't get the burst trade-off, I just get screwed because of the Ignite and the Oblivion Orb. So I end up having to blow flash there. But if you're unsure about these situations and you you think that you could potentially go for a kill, I suggest you limit test. And then, that's the only way you're going to figure it out. So I just back up my jungler, collapse onto the Udyr here. Udyr ends up walking out the long way. So, good job. Not much we could do here. Back up a little bit, go back to mid lane. Looks like Akali went for a bit of a reset. I end up staying on the map and backing up my jungler on the rift here. Again, I love any of these skirmishes. Any possible opportunity for a skirmish, I'm happy. And I know here, Akali doesn't have ultimate. I'm trying to pull the rift back out to us because I know Kayle is not really here and I didn't know where Nasus was. But then I'm like, okay, we can just do this. So beautiful. He goes in, he flashes. Ends up trying to turn around and get the rift, but I end up getting the kill. So now I'm 2-0. Looking really, really solid. End up getting the wave in, resetting again. Now I've got my tier 2 boots and my lost chapter. I'm killing it. So again, what I'm thinking of this situation, I like to prime myself in the lull sets. Okay, what ultimates are good for me? What's my what's my secondary win condition? At this point, I know I don't really want to play around my Echo. I mean, if I have to and it's for a 2v2, sure, but I don't really want to compensate for him. I think my bot lane's doing pretty well, and I just want to leave my Kayle and Nasus on an island here. The ultimates that I want to take, look, Nasus ult is actually pretty good. But the rest of the ults, I mean, Akali ult's also pretty good, but Udyr ult's terrible, MF ult's terrible, and Senna ult's actually pretty bad as well. So I've got my TP here, posturing, panning my camera to bot lane to see that there's, to make sure that I can TP. Now, this is also a great habit to get into when you have TP. Again, you want to be constantly scanning the map to identify opportunities to TP. Because again, that's your identity. Any opportunity to look for a skirmish, you should take it. So it looks like there's a bit of heavy trading here. I don't think they needed me, so I conserved my TP. Then you'll see in a second, Udyr walks around and Akali comes down, then I instantly TP. Now, I think I kind of misplayed this a little bit. I couldn't take the Akali ult here, unfortunately, because it was still on cooldown. I tried to peel for the Ezreal, but I'm not patient enough with my E. That's actually a situation where I think I should have been more patient with my E. I think I should have E1 instead of rushing my E2. Exact same problem, rushing my E2 again. This situation, I E, make them panic, or you wait for their gap closer, then I E2. This would have been a much cleaner skirmish. I mean, I don't think Ezreal would have survived, but it would have been much cleaner. But then in this situation, as soon as Nasus comes, I just take the Nasus ult, and then the rest is history here. And again, but this is exactly what Sylas wants to do. This is coherent with his identity. I love this. Okay, brilliant. Now, this was, again, another big mistake. What's happening? Everyone's reset. I've got, I don't really have much gold. I don't really need to reset. But it'd be better for me to just go back mid. But what happens, we end up greeting for the blue buff, thinking that we could quickly sneak it, but there was a ward behind us, we got collapsed on, and then I end up dying, and Akali gets a double kill, and a huge shutdown onto me. And this is where I remember, okay, look, I don't beat the Akali anymore. I remember actively thinking in the game right now, okay, I lose the 1v1, I'm still going to be strong with skirmishes, but Akali, I can't deal with Akali in the 1v1 anymore. So it's very important you identify that. Do you win the 1v1? And if you don't, how can you actively complement other people in the team, and just, what else can you do? So in my mind, I'm like, okay, as long as I play around my KO and my Ezreal and I play for team fights and skirmishes, I'm going to be all good. So I come back. I see a little bit of an opportunity where, like, Nasus overextended, and I end up going top for a little bit of a play onto the Nasus. Shove it out. Nothing too fancy here. Okay. Then we take another 2v2. I thought this 2v2 was completely fine. I think what I should have done here is I should have flash E'd here. Flash E2W, then R to follow, rather than start with R, because she could just flip through me. Again, this is all like skirmish optimization that is inevitable in terms of like your learning process with Sylas. You're going to look at a situation and be like this, and be like, what variable did I not consider that made me choose to start with R here? Why did I feel the need to conserve my flash? What was it? Oh shit, I forgot that she doesn't have flash and she's already used her E. There's all these little things, all these little micro interactions. As you get better with Sylas, you're going to get more comfortable with using differing ultimates. Skirmish optimization, getting very specific, is a part of the process. I would highly recommend you refer to the video on my channel called, I think it's like how to improve your skirmishing. I covered this in depth. So here, yeah, just mechanically misplayed. I should have flashed E2, W, and then follow with R, and I think she dies. Pretty straightforward. So we end up losing the 2v2. And these losses of 2v2s are devastating. Absolutely devastating. Worst case scenario. It's better for Echo to just play elsewhere. So it gets quite messy here. End up staying for the next wave, getting my Everfrost. Now I've spiked. Now, the Zakali's ended up going for a Magi, so she is a force to be reckoned with. So right now, I'm just chilling. I don't really want to fight her. I'm giving the wave. My team's getting picked off. Not really much I can do about this. I'm just playing conservatively, waiting, sitting under my tower. Then inevitably, look what happens here. Akali shows bot, their strongest member. These guys are very immobile. I know that I have a pike near me. So they overextend it. They think that I'm playing too defensive. I E2. I should have Everfrosted here. I think what I should have done is E. I didn't have an Everfrost from the start of the fight. I probably should have waited an extra second. Oh no, I could have. So E. I think I should have done E, then Everfrost, and then E2. Ends up turning into a bit of a brawl here, and this is exactly what I'm looking for. Now, I know that Senna did not have flash. Beautiful. Nice little skirmish. We end up cleaning up here. Boom. Now Akali TPs in to compensate. Again, this is my domain. She gets caught out. She dies. They chase her down. She loses her Magi stacks. And then the game explodes. Now, notice how I haven't really done anything proactive in a weird way, have I? I mean, I've done my TP plays. You know, I've done certain things. I've made a bunch of mistakes. But the interesting thing is that when you prime yourself mentally to say, okay, this is the member I want to play away from. These are the members that I know that I have a lot of threat on. These are the members, you know, I actively thought in my mind, okay, my jungler's around me, my pike's around me. These are very immobile champions that can't really peel me off of them. I've really primed myself. I'm seeing these targets as fresh blood. I'm like a crocodile. I smell a little bit of blood or a shark or whatever. I'm going in. Because again, chaotic skirmishes is my middle name. I'm level 11. I've got maxed out my W. 5 points on my W. I'm all good. Cannot afford to hesitate. And that's all it takes. 2 little extra kills here. Akali compensates. I get the mid tower. We get a dragon. The game starts to get out of control. Now I know I win the 1v1 versus the Akali. Because I know she has no Magi stack. So I just walk into the side lane. I just R her. W. Everfrost peel back when the TP comes through. I get the TP, which is unbelievably big. And now I know that Akali is very low, so I try to find her, and I walk through the brushes just to make sure she's not basing very greedily. Boom. E2, W, passive, passive, passive. Dead. Love it. And that's basically end of review at that point. I'm absolutely out of control. Kale's been free farming. Ezreal's spiking up the wazoo. We're all good. It's a free game from now. And I know that we win skirmishes. So if we fast forward a little bit here, all I do is I go and I push and I move. Push, move, and then they just FF because they can't really do anything. So I really thought this was a great VOD to review because I think it highlights a range of problems that you guys are going to be facing. I think that the main ones were skirmish optimization, rushing E2, adapting to the itemization of the enemy, especially when they get heal cut, adapting the way you use your W based off their itemization, identifying members with low mobility in order to punish them, having no fear of skirmishes, trying to conserve TP for side lane skirmishes, all this stuff. What I talk about in the guide. Hopefully this gives you a little bit of direction. Last word of advice, guys and girls. Get very specific about the 1v1s. Get very specific about the matchup. The more detailed oriented you can be in the matchup in terms of what you can and can't get away with in terms of your trading patterns, the more success you're going to have with Sylas. And get into the details with your skirmishing. Very, very important. So let's now jump into community Q&A. So now for the community Q&A. So about a week ago, I asked you guys what are some questions you had for my Sylas guide. I'm going to go ahead and break down and answer some of these questions that got the most upvotes. The first one here was from Aka Joe. Oblivion Orb versus him early or no? He heals so much. What to do about that? ... Okay. So this is a great question, Aka Joe. It really depends on the type of champion you're playing, okay? So for low range matchups, so maybe you're playing like a Viego or Renekton or a Kali versus Sylas, yes, it's amazing. You should basically be going first item executioners or first item orb. This is because you're able to proc it consistently and you're always trading with each other, okay? Now for high ranged, hard counter matchups, maybe you're playing like a Lucian into a Sylas, no, I don't really think it's necessary because I don't think he's really going to be in range to W that often. You're just going to slow poke him out. He's going to get chunked and then he's screwed. I don't think it's that appropriate. But for high range matchups, but not counters, right? So you're playing Orianna into Sylas. I wouldn't go at first item. I would still go my tier. Then I would go orb. Okay, it's more of like a second item. Okay, so that's the way I view it. And this is all because of, even if Orianna was to get an early tier first base, it just doesn't do anything because you're just going to go and you're still probably going to lose the trades. That's why you still need to value your tier. Okay, so hopefully this clarifies when you should or shouldn't be buying it. Next one here is from S11 Sylas. How hard does rushing early magic resist counter his kill pressure against you? No. Not at all. It doesn't really counter his kill pressure because he isn't burst oriented. Getting MR doesn't really do jack shit. I actually versed a Zillion or something like a week ago and he rushed a Verdant Barrier. I'm like, great, you just do less damage now and I can stay longer in the fight. Couldn't care less. So do not rush magic resist versus a Sylas. Next one here is from Wish, not a Sylas player, but frequently run into them in solo queue. I think it would be super awesome if you did a slide on his identity, similar to how you did with the old Orianna guide, where it would state like, Ori hates early skirmishing or something along those lines. Yep, hopefully I did this within this guide. As you can see, Sylas loves skirmishing, so you ideally want to avoid 2v2 skirmishing as much as possible versus Sylas and isolate the lane. Which is kind of what I covered in the guide. So look, I might go on about this more in a specific video that covers how to counter Sylas because I know a lot of you verse him, I myself included. But yes, isolating the lane is the key to success, unless of course you already win the 2v2 and you're playing a champion like Renekton or Viego or something like that. Next one here is from actually my Discord, my Midland Academy, from Kamikuro. He says, as Sylas, what do you do in a slow-paced game where there are little skirmish opportunity or jungle consistently plays, or the jungler actually consistently plays to your side lanes, I'm assuming away from your lane? Now, look, it really depends on the composition. There are some comps where Sylas scales completely fine. I'm chill, I'm relaxed. I'm just going to sit back, relax. I'm going to minimize. I'm going to, value my farm, but obviously not at the expense of XP, obviously. Maybe put 3 points into my queue, sit back, grab a cocktail, sit under my tower, get the beach chair out, relax, right? This is because I know inevitably when it comes to those dragon fights, I'm going to have plenty of good ultimates and I'm going to be able to do my thing. I'm all good. But then there are going to be other games where I'm not okay. And maybe I'm not, I feel like I'm slowly losing, my side lanes are losing, and I don't have many good ultimates, in which I might have to try and make a creative play. Maybe I conserve my TP to make it side lane TP play, or maybe I actively call my jungler to come mid at a specific moment, or I sacrifice creeps in my lane to make a creative roam play. Something like that to create a secondary win condition, just like you would with any other champion. But what I would urge you to do is, it's very rare that I'm in that situation, because generally when you pick Sylas, there are at least 1 or 2 good ultimates on the enemy team. That is all you need to just relax. Okay, if the jungler doesn't play towards me, eventually, inevitably, post, level 7, level 8, something will happen. And if there isn't anything happening, then either you're taking such bad trades that the jungler is ignoring you, or there is such an obvious secondary or main win condition that it's not in the best interest for you to be played towards. So, but yes, largely minimizing with Sylas is completely fine. Kunio. I get shoved in normally when I'm playing Sylas, even against most melee champions. I feel like I can never roam since I'm constantly shoved. Should I sack the wave to roam? And when you do... Okay, let's answer the first part of this question first, okay? Sylas is not a roam-oriented champion. Like, you want to play around mid. There are certain champions that want to play, like, mid to sides. Like, for example, you're playing, like, a Talon or something. You want to get prior, then, like, make a play on a side lane. Then there are other champions that just want to play around mid. Like, he doesn't want to be in the isolated 1v1, but he wants fights to be played around you. 2v2s, 3v3s, etc. So, no, I very, very rarely sack the wave to roam, because fights should be played around me, because I'm probably taking heavy trades. If you are constantly getting shoved in, that is a sign that you are either missing trading opportunities or you're playing too defensively. So I would go back to the biggest mistakes or the early lane tips, or even look at the way I played my my VOD that I reviewed. You know, you're probably missing opportunities to EW aggressively. You're probably bitching out, putting points in queues, seizing on a tower, missing opportunities. Remember, post level 3-4, you can just EW in. You can do whatever you want. Okay, you generally will win the trade no matter what the champion is. Okay, yes, okay, that's a very bold statement to say. I'll take that back a little bit and say you got to be specific about the matchup, but I can't even remember a time where I'm just kind of stuck under my tower getting shoved in. It's just not really a thing that I come across. So that says to me that there's some big problems with your trading patterns that you need to get specific about. You're playing too defensive, man. You need to look into that. Or just call for ganks, man. Call for ganks. If you're heavy trading and the waves on your side, call for ganks. Sylas loves ganks. You can gank settle with your E2. It's very, very easy. Now, for the second part of this question, you said, where do you go tank item? When do you go a tank item 6? I don't know. I never get to that. You just don't get to that point of the game with Sylas. Like, the game should be ended at your third item, regardless. So, doesn't really matter. And I would go raw AP even if that was the case, because again, raw AP suits Sylas very well because your durability comes from your healing on your W. And when do you buy cloth armor or mantle for early defense? If you're versing a lethality champion, sitting on one cloth armor is great. If you are versing a burst-oriented magic damage champion, maybe like a Fizz or a LeBlanc, I would go a null magic mantle, unless it's obviously like a double AP mid jungle, then I would go a null magic mantle as well. Okay, next one here from T-Rappy1993. What are important backtimers, item, level spikes to abuse, TP, or ignite? Hopefully I've covered most of this already in the guide, but as for level spikes, once you get 3 points in W, Sylas becomes a big problem. Every single point in W post level 3 becomes incredibly meaningful. Once you get to level 9, I would say you're the biggest problem. But the rest of it, hopefully I've already answered in this guide. Next one from Matthew 9. Is it possible to blind Sylas? Yes. I blind Sylas all the time, and a lot of people in high-low Korean solo queue, they all blind Sylas. Because generally, there are going to be good ultimates in the game. Ideally, though, the best case scenario is that you're like midway in the draft, you've already seen a few of the enemy champions, you don't know what your mid matchup is. But it doesn't really matter because you know that there are like 1 or 2 good ultimates on the enemy team, okay? And because for Sylas, the 1v1 very rarely matters, and you can always minimize through your queue and putting points in your queue and going for tempo resets, there's always going to be opportunities to minimize and play for 2v2. So you're all good, okay? So definitely he is very blindable. And also, a point on this, Matthew, if people are concerned about countering Sylas with like these niche mid picks, like a set mid or whatever, who gives a shit? Most of the time, unless it's a Renekton or a Viego, either they're not going to have the champion mastery to win, or you're going to win the 2v2 regardless. So if you ban Viego, which I do a lot of the time when I play Sylas, it's all good. You're rock and rolling. Next one is from Zhao. I'm trying to learn Sylas at the moment, and I feel like all I want to do is fight constantly, but I don't get how I want to manage my waves, nor the goal in my game and how to finish the game. This is a great question. So there's a few things we need to touch on here. I covered the early wave management, but as for post first base, generally you want to keep neutral state or slightly on your side, unless you are clearly identifying a moment where you need to shove for immediate priority for like an objective. And the reason you want to hold it slightly on your side in the middle is because that gives you flexibility. It still gives you room to trade aggressively with your E, but it doesn't give them so much priority such that you can't go to the skirmish if it were to break out. So it's like that middle ground. Now, as for winning games, look, Sylas, because of his very chaotic, strange identity, there is no one way to win a game. All I know when I'm in a game is Sylas. All I'm thinking is about, okay, how can I increase the likelihood of a skirmish? How can I be at that skirmish? And how can I effectively operate in that skirmish? So generally, you just want to call for as many objectives as possible. You want to play for as many skirmishes as possible and constantly back up your jungler. Grow awareness towards your jungler's location. And whenever you win a fight, you're going to get an objective leading to more one fights, leading to extra win conditions. Generally, Sylas can be a main win condition in himself, but then there are going to be other games where the ultimates aren't good enough for you to be a main win con, and then it's going to be you complementing a secondary win condition. So basically, TLDR, you want to be complementing your jungler's location as much as possible, calling for ganks as much as possible, not as much as possible, but when the opportunity presents itself, and calling for objectives to get these dragon fights, increase the likelihood of skirmishes and team fights. That's about it. That is generally the process of winning a game of League of Legends with Sylas. Very chaotic, very sloppy. Next one is from Alfonso Oyanedel. How to play against the hardest matchups like Zoe, Aurelia, and when to go TP Ignite. So when you're versing matchups like Zoe and Aurelia, you can put 3 points Q if need be, and just play to get shoved in and minimize with Qs. That is completely fine. These are both matchups where you need to use your E reactively. You need to use your E reactively to the Aurelia stun. You need to use your E reactively to the Zoe bubble. But again, the mentality is, okay, look, I'm not going to win the 1v1. That's okay. But when my jungler inevitably comes around mid, we're going to be able to win the 2v2. Or even if I get ignored, I'm going to have enough farm that when he does come, I'm going to be healthy enough, and I'm going to have enough levels and have enough items to be able to fight and win this 2v2. Okay, now if in the scenario where the Aurelia shoves and bounces the wave, that's where things will get very problematic, in which case you need to heavily lean to your vision, or you need to call for your jungler, in which again, there might be a potential 2v2, which is great for you. Or you need to max range Q. You need to sit back and max range with Q and then E reactively to the Aurelia stun. And as long as Aurelia doesn't hit the stun, I don't think she'll be able to chase you down and kill you. But that is a matchup I'm completely unfamiliar with. I don't verse many Aurelia mids because when they do play versus me, again, I just minimize effectively, and then I'll just TP back if I get low, and then constantly look for those 2v2s. As for the second part of it was farm, and give pressure. Get as much XP as possible and play for those 2v2s like I said before. What I might actually do, what I'm thinking of doing, is maybe I should actually upload a VOD. If I ever end up versing, I don't think I recorded it, but upload a Sylas v Zoe VOD and upload it onto the YouTube channel and kind of step through how I process that matchup. That might be something I should do at some point on my channel. So hopefully this helped you out. There's a lot of information here. Again, this is just my opinion. Put a lot of work into this. I'd love to hear your feedback. I'm going to do another guide soon. I don't know who I'm going to do my next guide on. Otherwise, I'll see you guys around the YouTube comment section, and I'll see you soon in the next video. Cheers.